Hey everybody, Wandering Pastor here on a nice early fall afternoon here in Michigan. The colors are starting to change. You'll see that in some of the leaves behind me. It's been kind of fun. I wanted to talk to you about three things today. Fear, faith, pride, and COVID. Okay, that's four, but you'll see what I mean. COVID has obviously gotten a lot of our attention, and it should. I mean, it's a serious thing with a lot of potential for life-changing impact. It's been one that's been headlines since March, or actually before that, February of 2020, and it's still going on, right? It's still peaking and having lots and lots of cases, and fortunately fewer deaths, but still a serious thing. And the thing is, we just don't know. I mean, one of the things that's been so maddening about COVID is it seems like, obviously most of the people who are seriously affected are older and have other what they call comorbidities, but every once in a while you'll hear about it hitting somebody that you just don't think it's going to hit, and it does, and you wonder, how's it, what's happening, right? Kind of crazy. However, the fear of COVID has taken over many people's lives to the point where they are doing anything to avoid the potential of COVID, because that's the one thing they have to avoid. And I kind of wanted to bring a little bit of perspective in here, because the reality is, I just saw some stats today. The reality is that 44.1 million Americans have had COVID. 700,000 have died from COVID. Now, 700,000 is a lot of people. And for those who have done it, who have been affected by it, it's been serious. I mean, I've known several people who have passed from COVID and others who have been ill from COVID. I've had COVID myself. And I know that there's a fear that comes when you hear that word because of the headlines. But when you think about 44.1 million people having it and only 700,000 perishing, that means 43.4 million people have recovered from it in America. That's good news. That means natural immunity. That's good news. That's the vast majority. And so sometimes we hear headlines and we think if you've got it, you're going to be really in bad shape. And the truth is, the majority of people are not. That's good. But so fear has taken over. Other people from the opposite perspective, right? Who have said, COVID, schmovid, right? They've responded in a sense by fear of the vaccine. So some people have feared COVID to the point where they're going to give the vaccine, and they're going to give 15 boosters, and they're going to take them all if they have to, and they're going to give up whatever things, liberty they need to give up in order to protect themselves from COVID, because they're believing the fear. Others have gone the opposite way, and they've, in a sense, believed the fear of the shot. And so, I think 186 million Americans have been fully vaccinated, and the number of deaths, if they're all attributed, is 15,000. Now, that's more than ever before in a vaccine, and yet it's still, out of 186 million, is 15,000. So the odds about you having an adverse reaction, a serious one, certainly a death is a serious one. Again, it's not to minimize those that have, but the odds against any one person getting the vaccine and having a serious reaction like that are pretty small. And so fear is not the main thing, I think, you should be responding to or with when we come to COVID or the vaccine. Fear is not what God wants you to have. The other thing is pride, and pride comes up here a lot because we tend to be this way. We are proud people. We tend to think we know the right answers. We tend to think we know the right answers not only for ourselves, but for everybody else. And so if you're like me, you've done a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of praying, a lot of trying to figure out, listening to different speakers from different perspectives and trying to figure out what's the right understanding of this. And we tend to do that. When we come up with the answer for ourselves, we assume everybody else has to have the same answer. Well, I decided this, therefore you should do it too, especially if you're a Christian. If you don't decide what I do, then you can't really be a Christian, because after all, that's why I'm decided, right? And we tend to be that way, and we're very proud, very arrogant people, and pride never comes from the Lord, ever, period, ever. Pride has been the number one sin that has ruined everything from the Garden of Eden right up until now to our lives. And when we're proud and when we're doing things out of an arrogant way, in a self-centered way, we can't really hear God. And so pride is not what God would want you to respond with either. What he would want you to respond with, of course, is faith. Faith in him, faith in his leadership, faith in his protection, faith in the fact that he knows you and he loves you and he created you. And in fact, Psalm 139 tells us that not only did he create you, he knit you together in your mother's womb, but that every day ordained for you was written in his book before even one of them came to be. Even before COVID was a thing, God knew your end. And so the great news about that is that you don't have to fear. You don't have to wonder whether somehow you're going to slip through God's fingers. You're not. And that's where faith can drive you into his arms, which is exactly the correct response. I've talked before about how I think God is allowing things to be shaken so that we would move to him. We would go toward him. We would find him on our knees, humble ourselves before him and seek his face. You know, Jesus said in John chapter 10 that I know my sheep and they know me. They will hear my voice, they will listen to my voice, and they will follow my lead. That, I think, is what we're called to do with respect to COVID and everything else and how you respond to it. Here's what I know. Fear is not of God, not for his children. Pride is not of God, not for his children. Faith is what he wants us to do. Faith is how he wants us to follow. Faith in humbling ourselves before him and seeking his face and following his lead for us humbly, lovingly, but faithfully is what he wants us to do. Not, arrogantly telling everybody else what they should do. So I just wanted to put that out there for you. If you're a believer in Jesus Christ, don't give in to fear about COVID or about shots. Don't give in to pride. Don't give in to arrogance and selfishness and rudeness, certainly. Have faith. Follow his lead. Let him guide you. Let him remind you that you are in his hands and that nothing, not even COVID, not even a vaccine, can take you out of his hands. And then seek his face, seek his leadership to know what you should do if you are still deciding whether or not to get the vaccine. He may say yes. In my opinion, he may say no. As I've shared before, for me, the answer has been no, at least to now, for a lot of reasons, which I'll go into another time, but seek his face, listen to his lead, and don't assume that what he leads you to do is exactly what he's going to lead somebody else to do. Okay? So, Wandering Pastor saying, peace. See ya.